welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And joining me for tonight's second segment of the program is Ambassador Raf'at al-Ansari, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee at the People's Republican Party. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're going to be taking a look at the situation in Syria as a whole, but perhaps let's take a look at each element or the most important elements in the Syrian crisis today. And let's start off with how you view, or your analysis of, President Bashar al-Assad and where he stands in all this.
Great. I'll try to give you and the audience bullets of my analysis. As a matter of fact, recapturing Aleppo was a major accomplishment for Assad. This will consolidate his position in the western part of Syria.
Right.
Still, Assad is a little bit too weak to control the eastern part. His army are exhausted, tired, fought brutal fights for 5 years. They are less in numbers, so he cannot do that. The second part is Assad have a very ambitious announcement and plan that he said after Aleppo he is going to liberate all of Syria. This cannot be done right now. He lacks forces and he lacks the power, despite of the air support from Russia, of the ground support from Iranian and Hezbollah militias in the ground. Still, he lacks this. He cannot fulfill his part. Assad was very keen to liberalize Aleppo before the arrival of Trump and his administration.
Right.
Trump and his administration, they are expected to change the policy, the American policy, vis-a-vis or towards Syrian file. Especially that Trump said several times that he is going to, he has no problem with the continuation of Assad regime, but he has a problem with Daesh. So they are expecting that this will be a big positive part of the arrival of Trump. The fourth part of Assad, I wanted to say that recapturing Aleppo was on the expense of the humanitarian situation.
Right.
Assad had to go through a random killing, seizure of the city that deprived citizens before the fighting militias, deprived them from food, water, medicine, whatsoever. And I believe that this is going to affect the future of the living together ethnics and mosaic of Syria in the future, because Syria is composed of Sunnis, Shiite, Alawite, Kurds, Christians, Druze, and they were fighting each other because each one of those ethnics were a part of a segment of the fighting. So this is going to affect very negatively in Syria. And I believe here, whether Assad will remain or will be out, and this will come in our analysis, whatever will be left of Syria will be a memory of a nation, and whatever will be left of the Syrian people will be some people, because half of the population had been immigrated or internal or outside, moved outside of Syria, and they are having 320,000 killed, plus almost 500,000 injured. So this is going to be a trauma in their memory to live together after that.
Right. This is a very grim outlook at the future of what the future
I'm talking
has.
reality.
Right. For Syria, perhaps it is reality, perhaps it's a little bit harsh, but what about the opposition? The opposition, as we know it, seems to be very divided, seems to have no clear leader, and yet its existence is somehow important. Tell me a little bit about how you see the opposition's existence in all this.
Let me tell you the following. When you said divided, I would say incoherent. There is no harmony. Nobody knows who is the moderate position, who is the hardliner position, who are the jihadist position. As you said, there are no leader. So this led to two things. Number one, this incoherence led to weakness, and the incoherence and the weakness led together for the loss of Aleppo. The opposition now, they are existing in a small geographical area. That's why they are condensed. This geographical area mainly is the Idlib province, plus some isolated pockets around Damascus, Aleppo, and Homs.
Right.
So they cannot really move easily, and they cannot have a proper way of military resistance. Plus, they are lacking already the foreign military aid, so they don't have a lot of space to go. Their influence became less, their negotiating power became less, and that explains why the opposition agreed, even just before the liberation of Aleppo, agreed to go to Geneva once again, despite that they were refusing for that, to go and to start negotiations with Assad's regime. And they even agreed to participate in the suggested initiative from Russia and Turkey to have negotiations, where Russia promised to pressure Assad's regime and Turkey promised to pressure the opposition and also Daesh in order to reach a peaceful solution.
Right.
So,
who goes to the talks? I mean, if the opposition is not clear, if they're so divided that it's not clear who are, if you will, the good guys and the bad guys, who goes to the talks?
That's the dilemma in the Syrian conflict, that you cannot say who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, and already it's mishmashed opposition where each one is going differently. And this would lead us to the jihadists and mainly to ISIS.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the role that ISIS or Daesh plays in all this.
ISIS still up till now it's a capable military force that can fight, despite of the pressure and the military pressures and challenges. Still they are, especially that they are holding strategic positions in all the eastern part. Mainly in Raqqa and Deir Zur. And they are having still a good military capability that can re-establish the military fight, and they are still, despite that all media are talking that they are not having supplies, they are still having good supplies. From where, this is another thing. What I wanted to say, that Daesh believes that Aleppo is not the end of the war will continue.
Right.
And that's the main thing. In order to do this, Daesh has to, now, a new strategy, they have to support the opposition. And they want to support the opposition not because they like the opposition, no. But if Assad will finish the moderate opposition, as we are calling it, he will turn into Daesh with full strength, and they don't want to do that. They wanted the opposition to be strong with a military struggle and a thorn in Assad's side. So they will try to help them, especially through breaking the supplying military lines of Assad, and this would explain why immediately they recaptured Palmyra. And recapturing Palmyra is near from the supply lines, military supply lines of Assad's forces. So they will try their best to help, despite that they didn't do before, but in their interest they will do that.
Right.
That's my way of looking at it.
But the fight against Daesh is a long-going fight. It's one that is happening in Iraq and is one that is happening in Syria. And as you say, it seems to be an ongoing cycle. Will they now try, in one way or another, to sort of infiltrate the whatever other factions that exist now, or try to create some sort of unity or some sort of cooperation with them, and but hence will then the moderate opposition no longer be moderate?
As I said, it's in their interest to support the moderate opposition.
Right.
The moderate opposition is in a desperate situation now, so they are ready to cooperate with the devil. If this devil will be Daesh, let it be.
Well, why can't the devil be Assad?
Both.
Right.
But who is supporting? Of course, if ISIS is supporting moderate opposition, they will cooperate with it. If Assad is supporting moderate opposition, which will never happen, they will coordinate with it.
Right. Why do you think, though, if we go back to Assad, why do you think he has such a firm stance as to how he should continue on with the war in Syria? I mean, why isn't he more, if you will, lenient or more malleable, if you will, when it comes to negotiations? Do you think he feels that he has the upper hand because he has the support of certain countries?
His position now, with the Russian air support, with the ground Iranian different militias and Hezbollah different militias, he started gaining ground. And this is giving him more power, giving him influence in negotiations, and giving him a power in putting the upper hand.
Right.
So it's very obvious now who is doing what, for what reason.
Right. Well, what about Russia? Russia's role in this has been somewhat. It has been clear support of al-Assad, yet it has come under immense international pressure and at times, or a lot of times, condemnations for its airstrikes, particularly in Aleppo. How do you see Russia's stance in the war in Syria?
Let me tell you something, a lot of people, they are not paying attention to it. Russia put a rule that Moscow will be against the principle of changing political regimes by military actions. And the last regime they allowed to happen was Gaddafi's regime.
Right.
So they insisted in a hesitation moment and a weakness part and involvement of the American administration in other parts, they took the opportunity and they entered to Syria. Number one, to prevent the changing of the regime by force. Number two, Russia now is trying to gain the internal prestige and to get the international image by being there. Russia is part of any region, not just the Middle East. Russia is trying to be, again, the Soviet Union superpower. And in this, they are doing it with a very good strategy. Their involvement airstrikes only.
Right.
So with a very little power show, and compared to Afghanistan, for example, this is 20 times like this. And with the presence, they wanted to be there internationally, to be said, Russia is the main player in this area or in other areas. The last thing is, in the Middle East, since the 80s, Russia had been out of the region,
right,
except air base in Laziquia and the naval base in Tartus. So it wanted to have a foot in this region. And this region is going to be the hottest region, I think, in the coming 10 to 15 years coming in. So in order for them to have a say, they have to be present. So that's the most important for Russia. What they are doing, how they are striking, it doesn't matter. But in the meantime, they are always keeping the balance. So when they were evacuating the civilians in Aleppo with the militias and their families, when the Iranians stopped this evacuation and were trading them with to free the two villages of Shiite where the opposition is holding against, Russia intervened. This was yesterday. Russia interfered today, and it forced Iran to let the deal of the evacuation go, and even apologized on behalf of Iran.
Right. Before we get into what Iran benefits from being part of this war or of this equation, the other major power in all this, obviously, is the U.S. Now, the U.S. position right now, especially since we're seeing a transition, doesn't seem to be very clear. How do you see the U.S. position? How do you see it changing under the new President Donald Trump?
I said that in one program before. I said my estimation or evaluation that Barack Obama's administration was going to try to fulfill the agreement with the Russians. The Russians, they don't want to do that. They wanted to do it with the new administration. And they will try to intensify the attacks on Daesh and to lead the alliance in this. But so far, I think the United States is failing to do that. And definitely the Russians are waiting for Trump to come. Trump has a different intentions and different directions, and his administration will fulfill his intentions.
Right. So do you think that a U.S. foreign policy or policy towards Syria in particular under Trump will be totally different than that?
Yes, as I said, Trump has no problem with the existence of Assad's regime. Trump has a problem with Daesh, and that's why it's going to really concentrate on coordinating with the Russian part, and this will decide the future of Syria. But I wanted here to say that future of Syria, unfortunately and sadly, the Syrian people will not be part of the equation of deciding the transitional process and the peaceful agreement and the political negotiations.
Right.
Because they are not there. They are not factor anymore. It became internationalized, and they have to accept that since the internationalization.
I wanted to ask you, because obviously throughout the past 5 years, as the Syrian war has sort of unraveled, there was always talk about what we're seeing today on the ground as being a sort of some sort of new Cold War between Russia and the United States being played on Syrian soil. Do you believe there's an element of truth to that? And again, do you believe that when Trump comes, and with obviously all that's going on and sort of warming up towards Russia, then that will cease to exist?
Let me tell you something. Nobody can tell what Trump is going to do exactly, but at least there are some indications.
Right.
Trump will need 100 days to decide in the different files what he is going to do. And one of the files will be the Syrian file. So if we are talking about Trump needs 100 days, if there will be an understanding and a coordination between the Russian and the American parts, it will go into a transitional period process. I believe this process will take about 18 months. 18 months in order to settle down the whole civil war, in order to put a new constitution, in order to go for new elections. So if we calculate it, I would say from right now up till October 2018, Assad is staying.
Right. Do you think that the international community, though, has really looked into, because a lot of countries have supported that Assad should leave, should no longer be part of the equation, he has too much blood on his hands, etc., etc. But do you think they have all looked at the day after Assad leaves?
Now, this is no longer precondition.
Right.
Not for the Turks, not for the Europeans, despite of here and there some statements, but it's no longer a condition for that. Let me tell you something. The Iranians are also there on the ground. And if we are talking about Iranians, let me remind people that Iran or Khomeini's regime is paying back the debt to Syria. Syria was the only Arab country in the Arab world who was standing beside Iran in its war with Iraq in the 80s.
Right.
So they are paying back the debt of the father to the benefit of the son. Number two, Iran wanted to be a part of the solution in any regional conflicts. And they are very proud, and they are announcing it, they are not hiding it. They are already involved in Yemen, they are involved in Libya in a way, they are involved heavily in Iraq, they are heavily involved in Syria, so they wanted to do that. And they did this, and they used it skillfully to negotiate with the American administration the nuclear agreement with the United States and the other 5 Western countries. So they are always holding those things as cards. But if we look from the other side to Turkey, for example, Turkey mainly, they are after the Kurds. It's its own interest. And they wanted to hit the Syrian Kurds and to prevent any cooperation, coordination between the Syrian, Turkish, Iraqi, and Iranian Kurds. So They are after the Kurds because the Kurds are the main thorn on the back of the Turkish government. So it is very important also for Turkey to be present in the area, in the region. And they are playing the role of the moderate democratic country that's having the humanitarian role, that they are doing it with the Syrian refugees, despite that they are having a real dictatorship inside without any freedom. And also they are not just playing this role vis-a-vis the West, but they are using this as a card when it comes to negotiations with the European Union. If you remember last time we were talking, right, I told you that they are using it to pressure the European Union in order to be a member, or at least to have a free access to European citizens.
Right, because we're running out of time, and after we've mentioned all these different elements in this very complex equation, what are your evaluations of the situation overall and how it's going to be playing out?
The Aleppo is not the last military battle. War will continue, but probably with a different shapes. Assad is going to stay at least till the end of 2018. Others, they are talking about his term will finish in 2021, but I don't think so. We have to deal, if we are talking about it, we have to deal with the crisis or the conflict in three aspects, but in order. We have the whole European or international community has to deal with the humanitarian aspect, first of all, to stop these atrocities, to stop the hunger, to deal with the Syrian people whom they are dying, and goes on. When we reach this, we should talk about a ceasefire and military disengagement between all parties. Right. When this is reached already, we will start the negotiations between the different parties in order to reach a political solution and a peace agreement.
Right. Thank you very much. Ambassador Raf'at Al-Ansari, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee at the People's Republican Party. It was a pleasure having you with us. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the programme. Do join us again tomorrow, same time, same place here on Nile TV International. I'm Nancy Sarah Barakat, wishing you all a very good evening. Thank you very much.